Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. We go to the phones. Our next guest, Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak, joining us this morning. Matt, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Chad. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to have you on the program. There's a lot, obviously, going on nationally with the president and the 2020 Democrats. We're, now less than a month away from the Iowa caucuses, Matt. It's starting to get real, isn't it?
It is. And I tell you, I mean, I'm in some ways, I see the Democratic primary as wide open now as maybe it's ever been. You see some sort of minor changes in the top four. Appears, maybe Bernie Sanders is rising. Biden remains kind of set in terms of the national numbers and the early state numbers. Elizabeth Warren has come down a little bit. Buttigieg has been sort of steady in a range where he could. Yeah, it is wide open with 3.5 weeks to go.
Yeah, it's something where even Mike Bloomberg has somehow raised, at least in one national poll, has come up to third place, tying Elizabeth Warren. Is this and I know at the very end of this last year, Matt, you said that you could see this heading towards towards the convention. I think Karl Rove has also said get prepared for a brokered convention. Is this thing, I mean, with so much uncertainty out there, is that almost kind of the favorite odd right now that this thing is going to go all the way to the convention, you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on, these early states. Does it narrow the field quickly? Does one person and do they start to get, people rallying behind them? Look, if one person were to win Iowa and New Hampshire, I think there would probably be quick movement to try to coalesce behind that person. But I think it's probably more likely that different people win some of these early states, which is a scenario that Mike Bloomberg really has been, I think, counting on. And I don't think Bloomberg is much of a factor, but, if he's going to spend, $100 million on Super Tuesday, he's going to get some delegates on that day and may end up being a factor. So, yeah, I think the odds of a contested convention on the Democratic side are as high as they've been in the last 25 years. Certainly history would tell you that it won't happen because it hasn't happened in a long time. What's different this time is you have such a fractured field, no real front runner, and basically 4 or perhaps 5 first-tier candidates, and they're all going to be amassing delegates throughout February, perhaps even into March. And so if no one can amass an early lead, they're just not probably going to be able to be dominant as the delegate-rich states move forward. And as I've told you before, since the Democrats allocate delegates proportionally, unless someone has an overwhelming lead, they're just not going to ultimately get over the majority threshold of delegates to clinch the nomination before the convention. So, yeah, I think it's very uncertain, but the February is going to be decisive one way or the other. I think a couple of these top-tier candidates are going to have to drop out or are going to be limping along, and it'll come down to 2 or 3 people. I think Bernie Sanders is going to be one of those 2 or 3 at the end of the day. It's going to be there. As Elizabeth Warren has sort of floundered, I think he's now really the strongest progressive candidate in the field, and I think that is valuable real estate in a fractured Democratic primary makeup of candidates.
Will the Democrat establishment allow Bernie Sanders to get the nomination? I mean, they tried to destroy him last go around. Obama reportedly said that he would speak out against a Bernie nomination. I mean, I know you're not a Democrat strategist, but I mean, do you think the Democrats would allow Bernie Sanders to get the nomination?
It's a good question. My belief is no, they won't. I think they'll see him as far too risky in a really consequential election. They don't want to blow their one chance to defeat Trump for re-election. But I also think they have less control, this cycle than they've had in the past. They cut the number of superdelegates in half. Obviously, people are going to be watching the DNC very closely in terms of the actions they take. There was all kinds of monkey business going on last time against Bernie. And they risk, really turning off that progressive wing who they're going to need in terms of volunteers, in terms of small dollar donors, in terms of energy and momentum and enthusiasm from their base. So there are some risks there. Again, I have difficulty seeing Bernie ultimately get a majority of delegates because that would require him to have a pretty significant majority of the Democratic primary electorate supporting him. I just think in some ways he reminds me of Trump in terms of the political makeup, right? Trump had a high floor and a low ceiling, and we had the largest field ever. The Democrats are in a similar position, and when you have a large field, having a high floor helps you. When you have only a couple candidates, having a low ceiling hurts you, and that never really hurt Trump. Got down to the end with Cruz and maybe Kasich. Cruz won some states there, but ultimately Trump was able to get a majority. The question is whether the Democrats will get down to one or two candidates early enough that Bernie's low ceiling ultimately prevents him from being the nominee.
Yeah. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak here. Matt, what do you make of Julian Castro endorsing Elizabeth Warren?
Puzzling. He's effectively throwing a lifeline to a drowning candidate. Not a lot of people announcing endorsements of Warren right now. She's really peaked about a month ago. Just doesn't have the momentum she had, and I think the odds that she's a nominee are the lowest they've been in several months. It seems to me that this is a VP play, which is strange because if he'd waited, he could have potentially been a VP for a number of these candidates. Just because he endorsed someone else doesn't necessarily mean he won't be the VP. Of course, Pence endorsed Cruz late, kind of a weak endorsement in Indiana, and Trump selected him. But it certainly puts Castro in a position, to be a factor in the Warren campaign. He's going to be campaigning with her, I think, this weekend. He's going to be a major surrogate. I just think, to me, it's a little bit about 2020. I think it's even more probably about 2024. I think he wants to be a future leader of the party. He sees the party moving left. He doesn't see the advantage in going towards the middle and endorsing, someone like Biden, or Buttigieg, who's more in the middle. I think he sees Buttigieg as more of a rival going forward after 2020. So I think that's what that's about. I'm puzzled by it because Julian Castro is more moderate than Elizabeth Warren's politics would indicate. He certainly was more of a moderate mayor. But when he decided to run for president, he decided to go far left. And look, it's really, I think, foreclosed his political future. I don't think he's going to be running for statewide office in Texas anytime soon, not with a chance to win, given some of the positions he took. So he's all in on progressivism, and we'll see how that works out for him.
Very interesting. Matt, we take a look at the current state of the world, President Trump, with this the droning of Soleimani. How does that? Do you think, how does that impact the psyche of voters? I mean, this far out, it may not matter, but as of right now, how does this impact, the election moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think from a national security standpoint and a foreign policy standpoint, you hate to sort of analyze these issues in a craft political way. But we are now in a presidential election year, and politics is going to play a big role in everything. Look, I think as long as the Iran situation stays, reasonably controlled, I think this will be of advantage to Trump. Taking out now two of the world's worst terrorists and doing it, with decisiveness and clarity, I think is a real strength and a positive. What I think is strange about this is just the bizarre kind of position the Democrats have taken. It is true when he took out al-Baghdadi, they were basically fairly positive towards that. For whatever reason, they haven't felt the need to be supportive of taking out Soleimani, and in many ways, Soleimani's worse, given his responsibility for more than 600 American soldiers being killed and thousands of people being maimed in Syria and Iraq. So as long as the Iran thing doesn't get into an actual war, as long as there aren't significant American casualties from their response, I think is unlikely. I think this is probably a net positive. I think it's made the Democrats again look kind of ridiculous. They refuse. These presidential candidates refuse to say anything negative, really, about Soleimani. Now they want to pretend that Congress wants to retake authority related to declaring war and to War Powers Act, which of course they ignored during the entire Obama administration when he was taking action in Libya and using drones to go after terrorists. So I just think the contrast is pretty sharp. I mean, Trump is now I think being seen as a decisive leader going after terrorists and being effective. And the Democratic position is, I think, confused and weak, and I think that's a positive contrast for Trump going forward, again, as long as this Iran situation doesn't get out of control.
Yeah. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak here on the Chad Hasty Show. Tell folks, Matt, where they can find your or how they can sign up for your newsletter and also your podcast.
Yeah, the newsletter is called Must Read Texas. We take all the top news from around the state, read all the newspapers, all the news sites, put it into one clean, comprehensive, easy-to-read email, and email to 3,000 subscribers every weekday morning by 9 a.m. You can sign up for a free one-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. The podcast is called Mac on Politics. One episode a week. Most recent episode is with Paul Steinhauser, the New Hampshire-based correspondent for Fox News. And we check in on the New Hampshire primary. You can find that on iTunes, on Google Play, on Stitcher, on Spotify, and at maconpoliticspodcast.com.
Very good, Matt. As always, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good, Chad. Take care.
That's Matt Mackowiak, Chad Hasty Show, KFYO.